I'm Chris Myers of Orlando Fly Casting Lessons and Central Florida Sight Fishing Charters. I'm a full-time fishing guide and I'm a certified fly casting instructor here in Central Florida. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about how you can improve your final presentation of the fly, whether you're casting to a fish that you see, a specific spot, if your leader's falling in a pile, if the wind seems to be blowing it off course and it only works when it's dead calm. We're going to address these issues with some tips and ways that you can look at your own cast and see if there are some improvements you can make to get more consistent deliveries to the fish. For starters, I'd like to mention that in today's video, we're going to be mainly talking about overhand casting using false casts with one-handed rods. Some of these techniques can be applied to multiple styles of false casting, but we are generally talking about an overhand style that looks something like this, where you're presenting your fly to a target, a fish you see, a specific location. We're trying to perfect that presentation and get away from casts where the leader falls in a pile short of where you intended it to land. So that is a consistent issue I see among anglers that I fish with. So today we're going to talk about how you can dial in your accuracy by perfecting the presentation. The first thing I want you to ask yourself is if this cast looks familiar to you, where you make a series of false casts and then make a presentation that either ends up down here waist level or below, or you make that cast and it falls in a pile even when your tip isn't quite at waist level. If one of those two things are happening to you, then this is definitely going to help you out. A lot of this stuff that I'm going to talk about today, I have been teaching to my fishing and casting clients for quite some time. But some of what I'm going to talk about today is thanks to a gentleman named Graham Hurd, who at the end of last year did a video all about maintaining tension in your cast and the importance of the loop relating to tension in the line. I'm going to put a link to that video in the description. I strongly recommend all of you check out that video if you want to learn so much more about how casting actually works. He's an engineer who goes into some great detail on that excellent video. But we are going to be incorporating some of the stuff that he talked about in today's video. So the first thing we're going to need is a relatively well-formed loop if we expect this fly to consistently and accurately get to where we want it to go. So if your loops look something like this and there really isn't much of a loop at all, probably a lot of what we're going to talk about today isn't going to help you, and you need to go back and check out some of my other videos on how to make loops. But let's just assume for today's purposes that you can make loops and they look relatively well formed, something like this. But the problem is when you want to put it to your target, you're having to do something completely different than what you were doing on all those false casts. So the first very most important thing we need to do is take that straight line that you're currently working with. If you're forming loops, you must be working in a straight line, and we're going to tilt that line so it is at this angle, so it is slightly lower in the front and slightly higher in the back. If we do that and maintain the same speed, power, distance with our rod tip, we should get a loop that goes up in the back, down in the front, goes up in the back, down in the front. So it unrolls higher in the back, it unrolls lower in the front, so that when it straightens out, that fly is directly above, a foot or two above where we want it to land. This will make sure that you can tell where it's going to land on the previous stroke. It also makes sure that if there is some wind involved, that wind isn't blowing that fly 5-10 feet off course, because as soon as it straightens out and loses all its momentum, so once that line is straight and the fly is hanging out there, we need to get in the water quick. Otherwise, wind is going to have a negative impact on our cast most of the time. So we need our loops unrolling up in the back, down in the front. Now, a lot of folks have loops that go in the opposite. They go down in the back and up in the front. And not only can I not really tell where this is going to land now, if I just let this hang up here, when it gets to the end, it pops back like a rock on the end of a string. When that string tightens out and that thing was heading away from me, it generally pops back towards me. To combat that, that is where people develop that final delivery stroke, which goes down into the water and often lands in a big pile. And it is doing that for a multitude of reasons. Here are some of the most important. The fly and the fly line only travel in the direction the tip is going when we reach the end of that stroke. So if I am making my stroke down, that is exactly where that fly line hit. The end of the fly line hit right there. If you could draw a line from this path, from where I took down, so this was the path my tip took, and it kept on coming down, that's exactly where it went. Some of the other issues affecting that are, which you will find in that video I mentioned a few minutes ago, is maintaining that tension. So in order to have a loop that unrolls towards our target and completely unrolls, we must maintain tension between the tip of our rod and that loop. If we lose that tension, the more tension we lose, the slower that loop travels until it will completely collapse. Here's how you can practice and check this out for yourself. You can try this simple little drill here. I want you to take your rod and try to cast as slow and gentle as you possibly can with two variations. So in the first variation, I want you to make a loop as gentle and light and dainty as you possibly can, but I want you to keep your tip high in the front. So we're going to cast as slow as possible. Really, really gentle, so slow that you're trying to get that loop to die out when it reaches the beginning of your leader. So ultra, ultra, ultra slow. But I keep my tip up, you notice it continues to straighten out. It doesn't die out. Now in this next one, I want you to use the exact same amount of power that you were using to get this one, but this time drop your tip down to waist level. That one completely collapsed. Let me get it back straight. That one completely collapsed. So I'm attempting, doing my best to use that same speed and power. Let's get our loop going and then drop it. That one curved off and didn't straighten out. That one I finally got to go straight. And a lot of you may be in the category of, sometimes I get it straight, sometimes I don't. If I do it enough times, eventually I get lucky and it straightens out. The purpose of this video and what we're trying to achieve is to be able to do that consistently and not get lucky now and then. So if I make this loop and I drop that, you see the loop was there, and by dropping the tip, I took away the tension on that bottom part of that loop. So that is what many of us do, that right there. You get it going, and then we drop it out. I'm gonna make that same cast and just keep it up here. Straightened out. Same cast, keep it up there. Every time. Let's add a little more line. Same cast, keep it up. Straightened out. So now we have we got about 30 feet outside the tip plus the leader. So we're pushing 40 feet. Let's do that one and drop the tip. Died. Let's make the loop and then drop the tip. Died. Now let's go back to keeping it up high. Straightened out. You keep that tip up until that loop is almost towards the target. Now for me, in the fishing that I do most, I'm strip setting, I'm moving the fly. We're fishing in non-moving water, so I'm having to strip the fly, having to strip set the hook So I want my tip to be down here. I never ever fish with my tip up here. Maybe you do with smaller hooks and lighter applications. So I need to be down here. But what I don't want to do is go from here in my false cast. So that is, most of us are doing that every false cast, whether we get the loops to go the direction we want or not. We are doing that. Nobody have ever seen false casts down here, because this is the result we're going to get every time. You're going to pull it in the water and have to snatch it back off the water, which is not something that's going to help us cast effectively or prevent scaring fish. So if we can't do that on our false cast, if we cannot do this every false cast, why would I want to do this on the delivery? You see the ridiculous result it gets. And that is exactly why we don't do it on the false cast. The reason you are tempted to drag that tip down on the false cast is because almost always your loops are going way too high above the water and you're attempting to get it to go down at the end. So not only am I losing all the tension, but I am yanking the bottom part of that loop apart. We had this awesome loop heading here, awesome loop. My tip's up here. Now I'm going to pull the bottom out of it, and I had no loop. And then I can get, well, yes, I just straightened out 40 feet. Uh-oh, that one didn't work. Maybe I can get lucky. Almost. Well, I got it out far enough. It doesn't really matter where it lands or how far you go. You can cast like that maybe forever. But if you're struggling with accuracy, pinpoint accuracy, trying to cast the individual fish or very small locations, it is all about presenting that fly exactly where we want it to go. Your tip is going to need to be up here. But we need to get from up here to here. Now I'm down. So watch how far this loop is before I drop the tip. I am cast now. So about the same time the fly hits the water, when it straightens out or almost straightened out, then I'm dropping the tip. I do not want to drop the tip immediately, or I don't want to put it up here and yank the tip down where I'm pulling, snatching back the line here and creating a bunch of slack. So there's a nice smooth transition from keeping the tip up, out, 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 down. About the same time the fly touches, if we're bringing our fly down, then you'll be able to time it so that both things occur. The fly lands on target, you are down here if you need to be. If you don't need to be down here, then you're just going to stay up here, and it landed exactly where you want. Maybe you're in moving water, you don't want your tip and all that line down, but both options are available. One of the best things you can do to improve your casting is to find a certified casting instructor for some one-on-one time where they can identify and correct your specific issues. If you're going to be in the Orlando area, you can come see me for an hour or two and we can do that in person. Some people do not have instructors where they live. They don't have the time to do that. If that's the case with you, I can also analyze your cast on video. You can send me several video files of your casting and we can work on your specific issues by me sending you back a narrated video of yourself casting, pointing out any flaws and specific corrections that you can make to improve your cast. If you want to find out more information, you can check out my page on my website on video casting analysis. If you've made it this far in the video, maybe we should talk briefly about why you're falling into the trap of your back casts are down here, the forward casts are up here, and you're having to do that on the delivery because you really have no other option. You have to get it down closer to the water. Almost always, and I've been teaching hundreds of people for many years, almost every single issue comes down to people are getting themselves in this position on the way up with the rod straight up and down, and then they have to finish with our wrist all with the rod tip traveling down. So it goes up, 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 down. Watch the two different casts. This one goes up, 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 down because I'm increasing this gap throughout the stroke more, 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 more. So if I do it slow, the only place I have left to go from here is down if I'm going to finish with a bunch of wrist. In the second example, I'm keeping the tip pointing this way as long as possible and not engaging the wrist until I have made a pulling stroke. Pull, 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 then engage the wrist. In the second example, I am moving my hand in a pulling motion, but keeping the tip pointing that way and not getting the tip straight up and down. So it is pull, 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 then I can flip. Do that once again, pull, pull, pull. The fly line comes off the water, then I can flip, because I'm starting, by the time the fly line comes off the water, my tip is here, and now it's on the water, but I can flip it up. So the two things need to happen. We get the fly line off the water, and our tip needs to be somewhere out here and not straight up over our head. Now, a caveat we are talking about here, most casts that are 30 feet plus, or if you're making very teeny tiny casts, you really don't need to do that. Those casts, so if I have just a few feet of line, I can do that all wrist, get away with this all day. So we're talking about when we need to reach a little farther, 40 feet, 35 feet, 50 feet, those casts, this tip better be out here somewhere when the line comes off the water. So now I can go up. But if I rotate wrist and forearm and I go now, when I engage the wrist, the only thing the wrist can do from here, bending my wrist from here, has to send it down 100% of the time. Bending my wrist from here can send it up. So ask yourself, are you casting down in the back? Which then forces you to cast up in the front to maintain a loop, which then forces you to slam the tip down on the delivery to try to get the fly to go closer to the water. So let's summarize and put all these things together that we talked about. We're starting with the tip down here, so that by the time I get the line off the water, my tip can be up here. I don't want to start up here, so by the time I get the line off the water, I'm down there. Starting with our tip all the way down, I'm lifting, 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 up in the back, out in the front, up in the back, out in the front, then follow through. Don't be in too much of a rush to get that tip down. Are you maintaining tension? See how easy and far you can cast by keeping that tip up. You can get off a considerable amount of line, and it will shoot a bunch of line because you are maintaining line speed by keeping that tip up high. As you drop the tip, you're losing speed that loop is traveling, the speed your fly is traveling. You're going to get shorter distances, less casts where the leader straighten out, and less presentations to the target you're looking for. So if you've enjoyed this video, I have lots more videos on casting. One I think you'll find especially helpful is how to effectively use your wrist in fly casting. You can check that one out right here.